I need some perspective here, Reddit. This is a long one, but I really need advice about my family situation that's been building up for decades. I, 35F, have grown up in what seemed like a normal family in suburban Massachusetts, but there's always been this dynamic that I've struggled with. My older sister Kate, 42F, has been the golden child since forever. From my earliest memories, our house has been like a shrine to Kate's existence, every wall decorated with her achievements, every conversation centered around her life. I still remember my 10th birthday when my parents forgot to buy a cake because they were too busy preparing for Kate's college interviews. They tried to pass off Kate's leftover graduation cake as my birthday cake, complete with her name still on it. Growing up, every milestone in my life was overshadowed by Kate's achievements. When I made the honor roll in middle school, my parents barely noticed because Kate had just been accepted to the debate team. When I won a local art competition in high school, they missed the ceremony because Kate had a college campus tour. I learned to celebrate my achievements quietly, alone in my room, knowing that sharing them would only result in a quick, "That's nice, dear," before the conversation turned back to Kate. Even our belongings told the story of our family's priorities. Kate's room was always filled with the latest gadgets, trendy clothes, and whatever she needed for her numerous extracurricular activities. My room, on the other hand, was a collection of hand-me-downs. I wore Kate's old clothes, used her old school supplies, and even had to make do with her discarded violin when I showed interest in music lessons. The violin was too big for me, and I struggled to play it properly, but when I asked for a properly sized one, my mother said, "We already spent so much on Kate's piano lessons this year." The pattern continued through high school. While Kate got private tutoring for her SATs, I had to study using borrowed library books. When she needed a car for college, my parents took out a loan. When I needed help with transportation, they suggested I take the bus. Every financial decision, every family conversation, every holiday plan revolved around Kate's needs and wants. College was a particularly tough time. Kate had graduated from a prestigious university with our parents' full support. When it was my turn, they could only offer to cover half the tuition at a state school. "We're still paying off Kate's student loans," they explained. "You'll need to figure out the rest on your own." So I worked 2 part-time jobs while studying, often falling asleep over my textbooks, just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Kate was starting her career in a job our parents had helped her secure through their connections. Everything changed, or rather, got worse, when Kate got married 7 years ago. The wedding became our family's sole focus for an entire year. My parents took out another loan for her dream wedding, complete with designer dress, luxury venue, and a guest list of over 300 people. I remember overhearing them in the kitchen one night, worrying about the payments, yet still insisting that nothing was too good for Kate's special day. As her maid of honor, was there ever any doubt, I was expected to plan an elaborate bachelorette party, organize bridal showers, and handle all the little crises that came up. When I mentioned being overwhelmed with managing these responsibilities while working full-time, my mother said, "Don't be selfish, Elizabeth. This is your sister's special time." Then came the twins. When Kate announced she was pregnant with twins, our parents were over the moon. They helped with the down payment on a house near them, despite still paying off the wedding loan. The day they signed those papers, I watched them drain their retirement account, the same account they said they couldn't touch when I needed help with college. But this was different, they said. This was for their grandchildren. And guess who became the default babysitter? Yes, me. At first, it was just occasional babysitting. "Elizabeth, could you watch the boys for a few hours?" turned into every weekend, then expanded to evenings when they had errands to run. My parents supported this arrangement, saying, "This is what family does," whenever I tried to protest. Kate and her husband Jack, 43M, took it for granted that I would always be available to help. The twins are energetic 7-year-olds now, and while I love them, they're exhausting. Every weekend follows the same pattern. Kate drops them off at my apartment unannounced, usually with some excuse about needing me time or having important errands to run. The boys run wild, turning my small living space into a disaster zone. When I try to establish boundaries or ask for advance notice, Kate bursts into tears about how overwhelmed she is, and my parents lecture me about being unsupportive. I've built my career in marketing, working long hours to establish myself. I've recently been offered a promotion that would require more travel and longer hours. When I mentioned this at a family dinner, hoping for some congratulations, my mother immediately said, "But what about the twins? Your sister needs you here." Kate added, "You can't take that job, Elizabeth. Who will help me with the boys? It's like my life, my career, and my time don't matter at all." Every time I mention being tired or busy, my mother says, "Your sister has 2 children to look after, you don't know what tired really means." My father adds, "Family should come first, Elizabeth." When I tried to explain how overwhelming it all is, Kate accused me of being jealous of her life and her children. "You're just bitter because you're still single," she said, as if my worth as a person is solely determined by my marital status. Last month, I finally decided to treat myself to a beach vacation. After a particularly exhausting weekend with the twins, where they managed to break my laptop and stain my couch with permanent markers, I realized I needed a break. I found a modest resort in Florida, nothing fancy but perfect for a peaceful getaway. When I mentioned it during our weekly family dinner, my mother's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's perfect. We should all go together. The twins would love the beach." Before I could object, Kate was already planning activities. "You can take the boys swimming while Jack and I have some alone time," she said, as if my vacation was automatically becoming their childcare opportunity. My parents even offered to upgrade my reservation to a better resort where they'd all stay, with the expectation that I'd help with the twins, of course. They started planning excursions and activities, all revolving around what the twins would enjoy, completely ignoring the fact that this was supposed to be my vacation. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision that would change everything. I booked a different resort on a small, peaceful island. I didn't tell anyone about the change in plans. I started making preparations quietly, arranging for time off work, packing my bags in secret, making sure my emergency fund was accessible. I know it's deceptive, but I just couldn't take it anymore. The plan is to separate from them at the airport. They'll be heading to Florida while I catch my flight to a different destination. I've turned off my location sharing and prepared for the inevitable backlash. Yes, I know this will cause drama. Yes, I know they'll be angry. But for once in my life, I want to put myself first. I've spent 35 years being the reliable sister, the perfect daughter, the always available aunt. I've sacrificed my weekends, my social life, and my own needs for my family's expectations. I've missed out on dating opportunities because I was always babysitting. I've turned down promotions because they would interfere with my family's needs. I've put my own life on hold to be available whenever they need me. At this point, I'm not just escaping a vacation, I'm escaping a lifetime of being taken for granted. I'm planning to use this as a turning point to establish firm boundaries with my family, possibly even taking a break from them entirely. I'm tired of being the family's safety net, the reliable backup plan, the one who always sacrifices. What should I do, Reddit? Am I being too dramatic? Should I just go along with their plans and accept my role in the family? Or am I right to want something different for myself? Update 1, thank you all for your support and advice. A lot has happened since my last post, and I want to share how everything unfolded. The day at the airport went exactly as planned, but was more emotionally charged than I expected. I arrived early, deliberately choosing a different check-in counter far from where my family would be. Through the terminal's glass walls, I watched them arrive, Kate managing the twins' rolling suitcases, my parents looking excited, and Jack checking their booking details. The moment they headed to their check-in counter, I quietly made my way through security for my own flight. My phone started buzzing immediately after they discovered I wasn't at their gate. First came the confused texts, "Where are you?" "We're at gate B12. Then the worried ones, "Elizabeth, are you okay? Did something happen?" Finally, the angry ones, "How dare you do this to us? The boys are crying." I turned off my phone before boarding my flight. For the first time in years, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and liberation. The guilt was familiar, I'd carried it most of my life. But the liberation? That was new, and it was intoxicating. My resort was on a small island, nothing like the busy tourist spot they were heading to. The moment I stepped onto the beach, I felt years of tension melting away. No schedule to follow, no twins to watch, no family drama to manage. Just me, the ocean, and absolute freedom. The first 2 days were actually difficult. I kept checking the time, thinking the twins would be having lunch now, or Kate usually needs help with bedtime around this hour. Breaking decades of conditioning isn't easy. But by the third day, something shifted. I tried activities I'd always wanted to explore but never had time for. I took a surfing lesson, feeling ridiculous but loving every minute. I joined a beachside yoga class, making friends with a group of solo travelers. One evening, I even went on an impromptu dinner date with an interesting man I met at the resort's coffee shop. Just a casual dinner, but it reminded me that I could have a life outside my family's needs. The real test came when I finally turned my phone back on after 5 days. There were 147 missed calls, over 300 text messages, and dozens of voicemails. My mother had even contacted my workplace, claiming a family emergency. Thankfully, I had already informed my boss about my vacation plans. I listened to some of the voicemails. My mother's voice evolved from worried to angry to manipulative. "Elizabeth, how could you abandon your family like this? The twins are devastated. Is this how we raised you?" Kate's messages were worse. "You've ruined everything. The boys keep asking for their Aunt Lizzie. Jack had to cut his meetings short because I can't handle them alone." But one message hit differently. It was from my father, and for once, he sounded uncertain. "Elizabeth, I don't understand what's happening, but just let us know you're safe." It was the first time I'd heard him speak to me without immediately defending Kate or pushing me to do more. I sent a single text to our family group chat. "I am safe and enjoying my vacation. I will contact you when I return. Please respect my space." Then I muted the chat and went back to enjoying my peace. The next 5 days were transformative. I read 3 books, actual novels, not just bedtime stories to the twins. I had uninterrupted conversations with other guests. I watched the sunset every evening without having to rush home to help with baths and bedtime. I even started journaling, processing years of pent-up feelings. On my last night, I had dinner at a small beachfront restaurant. The waitress, an older woman, noticed I was alone and asked if I was enjoying my solitude. When I briefly explained my situation, she shared something that stuck with me. "Honey, family is important, but not at the cost of losing yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is put yourself first." Upon returning home, I didn't go straight to my apartment. I had booked a hotel room for 2 nights, giving myself time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. I used this time to make concrete plans, updating my emergency contacts at work, changing my door locks, and most importantly, writing down my boundaries. My family discovered I was back through social media. I had absent-mindedly liked a work colleague's post. Within hours, my mother and Kate were at my apartment building, buzzing my intercom incessantly. I watched them from my hotel room window across the street, feeling strangely detached from their dramatic display. Tomorrow, I plan to face them. Not at my apartment, but at a neutral coffee shop. I've prepared what I want to say, but I know it won't be easy. My hands shake every time I think about it, but for the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself. And despite the anxiety, despite the guilt, despite the inevitable drama to come, I know I'm doing the right thing. I'll update again after the conversation with my family. Thank you, Reddit, for giving me the courage to take this first step toward freedom. Update 2. I met with my family at the coffee shop as planned, and it was even more intense than I imagined. Here's what happened in the past month. The coffee shop meeting started civilly enough. I arrived early and chose a corner table, positioning myself so I could see both the entrance and the emergency exit, a habit I developed from years of anticipating family drama. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee cup. They arrived as a unit, my parents, Kate, and surprisingly, Jack. No twins, thankfully. Before they could launch into their prepared speeches, I held up my hand and said what I'd rehearsed. "I'm setting boundaries, and they're non-negotiable." The next 2 hours were a master class in emotional manipulation. Kate burst into tears, explaining how the twins had been traumatized by my absence. My mother tried guilt, after everything we've done for you. Jack, unexpectedly, attempted to mediate, suggesting a compromise where I'd only babysit every other weekend. Dad mostly sat in silence, looking uncomfortable. The turning point came when Kate said, "You're being selfish. Family means sacrifice." Something in me snapped. Calmly, but firmly, I replied, "Yes, family means sacrifice. But it's supposed to go both ways. When was the last time any of you sacrificed anything for me?" The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I laid out everything: the years of being secondary to Kate, the financial inequity, the constant expectation that my time and life were less valuable than theirs. I showed them my calendar from the past year, every weekend marked with babysitting, every holiday centered around their needs. My mother tried to interrupt with, "But that's what aunts do." I countered with something I'd never had the courage to say before: "No, that's what paid babysitters do. And Kate, if you need this much help, maybe it's time to consider hiring one." The conversation devolved from there. Kate stormed out, my mother following her. Jack lingered, surprisingly apologetic, admitting they'd taken advantage of my availability. My father, still quiet, finally spoke, "We never meant to make you feel this way." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. After they left, I implemented my plan. I moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city. It's smaller than my old place, but in a secure building with a doorman who's been briefed about my situation. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to my workplace and a few close friends. The hardest part wasn't the moving or the logistics, it was rebuilding my life from scratch. Years of being available for my family meant I had few close friends and no real hobbies. I started small, joined a local book club, signed up for pottery classes, accepted dinner invitations from colleagues I'd always turned down before. The first weekend of true freedom was surreal. I woke up late, went to a farmer's market, and spent hours browsing in a bookstore, simple things that had been impossible before. No urgent texts from Kate, no guilt-tripping calls from Mom, no emergency babysitting requests. My family's reaction to my move was predictable but intense. They discovered my new workplace policy of not accepting personal calls during office hours when my mother tried to reach me through the company switchboard. Kate showed up at my office once, but security had been notified in advance. She left a tear-stained letter about how I was destroying our family. The surprising development came from Jack. He sent an email apologizing for his role in enabling the situation. He started taking the twins to activities himself on weekends, something Kate initially resisted but has had to accept. It's a small change, but significant. My parents are struggling to adapt. Dad sends occasional text messages, mostly awkward attempts at small talk. Mom alternates between cold silence and emotional outbursts. Last week, she left a voicemail saying, "When you're done with this rebellion, we'll welcome you back." She doesn't understand this isn't a phase, it's my new reality. Work has improved dramatically. Without constant family interruptions, I'm more focused and productive. My boss noticed the change and has put me in charge of a major new project. I'm also dating casually for the first time in years, though I'm taking it slow. The most profound change has been internal. The constant background anxiety I lived with for years has diminished. I'm sleeping better, eating better, and have started exercising regularly. My therapist, yes, I finally started therapy, says I'm showing signs of recovery from what she calls chronic family stress syndrome. Last weekend, I received a package from the twins, handmade cards saying they miss me. It was bittersweet, but I didn't let it shake my resolve. I sent them back a careful letter, explaining that I love them but need some time to take care of myself. Kate probably won't read it to them, but I needed to write it anyway. Yesterday, I ran into an old friend who said I look years younger. "There's a lightness about you now," she observed. She's right. Despite the guilt that still crops up, despite the angry messages and emotional manipulation attempts, I feel lighter. Freer. I'm learning that family love shouldn't feel like a prison sentence. Real love includes respect for boundaries, recognition of individual needs, and mutual support, not just one-way sacrifice. Next week marks 1 month in my new apartment. I'm planning a small housewarming party, something I'd never have dared before. Just a few friends from work, book club, and pottery class. No family, no drama, no expectations. Just people who accept me as I am. I'll update again soon. Thank you, Reddit, for helping me find the courage to change my life. Update 3, final update on my situation, Reddit. These past 3 months have been transformative, and I want to share how everything has culminated. Last week brought the confrontation I'd been both expecting and dreading. My father showed up at my workplace unannounced. Unlike my mother's previous hysterical attempts or Kate's emotional manipulations, his approach was different. He was calm, almost resigned, as he asked if we could talk over lunch. We met at a quiet restaurant near my office. For the first time in my life, he really looked at me, not as Kate's sister or the family's backup plan, but as his daughter. "You look healthy," he said, sounding surprised. "Happier." The observation hung between us, carrying the weight of all the years he hadn't noticed my unhappiness. He had come with a proposition from the family. They were willing to a compromise. I could have every other weekend free if I agreed to return to my role in the family. They'd even pay for my time with the twins, he added, as if monetizing the obligation would make it more appealing. Looking at him across the table, I realized something profound: they still didn't understand. They saw my independence as a bargaining chip, not a fundamental right. "Dad," I said, "I'm not negotiating my freedom. I'm living it." What followed was the most honest conversation I've ever had with my father. I explained how their constant prioritization of Kate had affected me, not just practically but emotionally. I shared memories he'd forgotten or never noticed, birthdays overshadowed, achievements ignored, dreams dismissed. His response was unexpected. Instead of defending their choices as usual, he sat in silence for a long while. "Finally," he said, "we thought we were doing what was best for the family. We never saw how much we were hurting you." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the first acknowledgement I'd ever received. The real breakthrough came when he asked about my new life. For the first time, he listened as I talked about my promotion at work, my pottery classes, the friends I'd made. I showed him photos of a vase I'd made, imperfect but mine. His next words stunned me: "You seem to have built a good life for yourself. Without us." The pain in his voice was real, but so was the recognition. We ended lunch with an understanding that things would never go back to how they were. He hugged me goodbye, our first genuine hug in years, and said, "I hope someday we can be part of your life again, but on different terms." That conversation seemed to trigger a final cascade of family drama. My mother, upon hearing about our lunch, launched a new campaign of emotional warfare. She's been telling relatives that I'm having a breakdown and needs an intervention. Kate, feeling betrayed by our father's acceptance of my choices, has been posting passive-aggressive comments on social media about selfish sisters and broken families. But here's the difference: none of it affects me the way it used to. My new life has given me a perspective I never had before. I see their behavior for what it is: attempts to maintain control over someone who's finally broken free. My new apartment has become a true home. The walls are decorated with my pottery attempts and photos of my chosen family, friends who respect boundaries and celebrate my independence. I've started mentoring junior colleagues at work, breaking the cycle of the toxic support I was trapped in for so long. The biggest change has been in my relationship with time. Weekends are mine to spend as I choose. I've taken up hiking with a local group, started learning Spanish, and even begun dating someone who understands and supports my boundaries. For the first time, I'm building a life that reflects who I am, not who my family needs me to be. Last Sunday, I received a handmade card from the twins, clearly written under supervision. It was full of guilt-inducing phrases about how much they miss their aunt. In the past, this would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and doubt. Instead, I wrote back a loving but firm letter explaining that sometimes adults need to take care of themselves, and that my love for them hasn't changed, even if I'm not as present in their daily lives. My therapist says I'm showing signs of what she calls post-traumatic growth, not just healing from the past, but building something stronger and healthier in its place. She's helped me understand that my family's dysfunction isn't my responsibility to fix. The most recent development came yesterday. Kate's husband Jack reached out, not to guilt me, but to share that my stand has sparked changes in their household. He's taken a more active role in parenting, and they've finally hired part-time help with the twins. Kate's struggling to adjust, but he thinks it's healthier for everyone. As I write this final update, I'm sitting in my home office, preparing for a business trip next week, something I never could have managed in my old life. The wall behind my desk has a framed quote that resonates with my journey: "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is set yourself free." To those who followed my story and offered support, thank you. You helped me find the courage to choose myself. To those in similar situations, wondering if they're selfish for wanting their own life, you're not. Freedom isn't selfish. Self-care isn't cruel. Building boundaries isn't betrayal. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my family. Maybe someday we'll find a new way to connect, one built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Until then, I'm focusing on nurturing the life I've created, my career, my friendships, my interests, and most importantly, my sense of self. This isn't just an ending, it's a beginning. And for the first time in my life, I'm excited about what comes next.